conceived of the idea of putting large colonies in space, large artificial places where people could live.
For 3 decades, the International Space Station has served humanity. Now its end is near. The last crew has already left the space station. All that remains are the memories of those who lived and conducted research here.
Confirmed trajectory. Slight drift, minus 0.3 degrees.
It has long since exceeded its planned lifespan. To prevent it from becoming a hazard, the 420-ton Colossus will be brought down in a controlled re-entry. A precision maneuver. The debris is set to land in the Pacific Ocean. There is no room for error. The ISS is racing around the Earth at a staggering 28,000 kilometers per hour. Braking maneuvers are gradually slowing it down, and thereby bringing it into an increasingly lower orbit.
Approaching critical altitude.
Entry into the Earth's atmosphere must be perfectly timed. Otherwise, the debris could miss the uninhabited target zone.
We are still too fast.
Execute correction burn. Back on profile.
With the ISS, an era of spaceflight comes to an end. But what comes next? Are we, as a species, ready to permanently colonize space? For humans to truly live and work in space, one crucial element has been missing until now. Artificial gravity. A space station with artificial gravity would be like a new level of civilization. Such a station would pave the way for entirely new branches of research, technology, and culture, and it would serve as a stepping stone for missions venturing deeper into space. Even our society would change, because we would have to learn to operate complex, self-contained systems sustainably and manage resources precisely. The real potential, then, lies not so much in the technology itself, and more in what it would set in motion. A new era. Work is already underway to turn this vision into reality. For example, in Cologne, Germany, at the German Aerospace Center, artificial gravity is initially to be used on a small scale to keep people healthy and fit in space. Because with every day spent in zero gravity, the body loses muscle and bone mass.
Also die Knochendichteverluste sind schon immens. Das ist schon was man jetzt wirklich in diesem ersten halben Jahr wirklich immens sieht. Und das ist auch nicht vergleichbar mit einem normalen Abbauprozess im Alter. Und das sind Sachen, die man auch wirklich, wenn man das jetzt ab einem gewissen Punkt weiter fortschreiten lässt, auch zum Teil irreversibel sind. Sprich, das wäre nicht mehr wirklich wiederherstellbar auf der Erde. Also die längsten Raumaufenthalte sind so ungefähr ein Jahr circa, vielleicht ein bisschen mehr. Da gibt es natürlich auch nur ganz wenige Astronauten und Astronautinnen, die das durchgezogen haben, auch wirklich diese Zeit im All verbracht haben. Und da sieht man schon, dass dann halt auch viel mehr Prozesse auch im Körper stattgefunden haben. Was man in 3 Jahren dann sehen würde, wenn so eine Crew zurückkommt, das können wir momentan nur spekulieren.
Even daily training can only slow down the deterioration process, not stop it. Because training without gravity is terribly inefficient. Dr. Timo Frett leads the experiments with artificial gravity. The goal? For people to train in space using artificial gravity to halt the physical deterioration process. It would be a milestone for space travel.
Faszination für Raumfahrt war immer da. Also mitbekommen von meinem Elternhaus, mein Vater wahnsinniger Raumfahrtfan auch und ich natürlich selber auch inspiriert von, weiß ich nicht, als Kind Star Trek, du hast Literatur, also dann siehst du, wo die Reise eigentlich hingehen könnte. Science-Fiction-Autoren sind in aller Regel Visionäre, das heißt, die wollen etwas zeigen, wo man als Ziel hinkommen könnte als Menschheit. Und das hat mich wunderbar fasziniert. Das hat gesagt, okay, das ist etwas, was ich machen möchte zukünftig. Ich möchte eigentlich Teil davon sein, diesen Weg zu gehen und Leute dort, also als Crew, später mal hinzubringen und zu sagen, hey, das ist eine wahnsinnige Herausforderung, es ist wahnsinnig inspirierend für viele Menschen auf der Erde. Es ist natürlich auch wahnsinnig gefährlich, also lass uns daran teilhaben, dass das funktioniert.
In this centrifuge, rotation generates centrifugal force directed outward. To determine how these forces affect the human body, numerous tests are required. And this time, Timo has to serve as the test subject himself. The researchers face a problem. In a small centrifuge, unpleasant side effects can occur, such as dizziness. This is because during rotation, less gravitational force acts on the feet than on the head. The brain receives conflicting information and has difficulty orienting itself. To ensure that astronauts can train in the centrifuge later in space, these side effects must not become a problem.
Ich kann dich hören.
Perfekt.
Also hier hörst du mich?
Ja, ich höre dich, laut und deutlich.
Final checks and safety measures, then it's time to go. The centrifugal force pushes Timo outward. He is now standing against the outer wall of the centrifuge. For him, the outside becomes the bottom. The The load on his knees during his squats is the same as if he were doing them while being on Earth. And what about the dizziness?
Wir haben festgestellt, es ist gar nicht so schlimm. Das heißt, das, was mich normalerweise zum Schwindeln bringt hier, wo ich sage, boah, irgendwann möchte ich hier runter, ist etwas, was, wenn ich Sport darauf mache, so ein bisschen übertönt wird.
As long as you don't just walk around in circles, but distract your brain with exercise, the whole thing is actually totally manageable. But if you want artificial gravity, not just for training, but as a permanent condition throughout the entire space station, the whole setup would have to look completely different. This idea is already over 100 years old. In 1892, the tragic story of a visionary begins. Herman Potočnik is born in the port city of Pula. At the time, the region belonged to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Little Herman grows up in a military family, a world defined by iron discipline. But hidden deep inside him lies a dream. If only we would work together instead of waging war, could humanity then fly into space and explore new worlds? But no, there is no place for such thoughts in this life. After his father's death, Herman studied at the Military Technical Academy near Vienna and became an engineer officer. Contemporaries described him as quiet, precise, and rather introverted. In 1914, an all-consuming darkness descends upon Europe. World War I breaks out. As a young officer, Herman plans military infrastructure, bridges, supply routes, and trenches. But the war takes its toll. Herman falls seriously ill with a lung disease, likely tuberculosis. The illness forces him to give up military service. This marks the end of his career as an officer. After the war, he lives in Vienna with his brother. There he withdraws more and more into himself. In the years following the war, life began to flourish once again. Joy, art, and dance return. Jazz comes to Vienna. Herman Potočnik is denied these joys. Severely weakened by his illness, he barely leaves his apartment. is still something within him, a glow, a passion, energy. Despite pain and weakness, it drives him to write down concepts and make sketches. He dreams of stars and galaxies, of alien worlds and the unknown. He dreams that one day humans might travel there. "30 years before the first humans fly into space, the engineer is already designing a rotating space station that generates artificial gravity through its rotational movement. With his last ounce of strength, he dedicates his truest self, his fascination, and his extraordinary way of thinking to the service of humanity. He calculates rotational speeds and develops detailed technical sketches. In 1929, his book is published, The Problem of Space Travel, The Rocket Engine. But Herman does not live to see the impact of his work. Just a few months after its publication, he dies from complications of his illness. He is 36 years old. Today, Herman Potočnik is regarded as a pioneer of space travel. With his ideas, he was far ahead of his time. For a century, the idea has been passed down through the generations to the present day. For a long time, the right technologies and materials to actually build rotating space stations were missing. But research at the DLR shows we are slowly getting closer. The next major chapter in space travel will be the manned flight to Mars. For such a long and complex mission, the centrifuge from Cologne could provide a decisive advantage.
Du bist Pionier, du kannst für die Menschheit letztendlich nach vorne gehen, einen anderen Planeten entdecken. Das ist faszinierend, das hat noch nie jemand vor dir getan. Das heißt, du bist mit deiner Crew unterwegs und erkundest völlig neues Terrain. Auf der anderen Seite ist es so, du bist sehr lange von der Erde weg, sehr weit von der Erde weg und der Weltraum vergibt dir nichts. Also es ist wirklich so, dass wenn das schief geht, dann geht das schief. Wenn meine Ressourcen zu Ende gehen, dann sind die zu Ende, dann habe ich die nicht mehr. Wir müssen aber die Crew fit halten, damit sie auf dem Mars ihren Job machen können. Das heißt, sie soll landen, sie soll bei unterschiedlicher Schwerkraft, die wir auch nicht gewohnt sind, ihren Raumanzug anziehen können, sich gegenseitig helfen dabei und den Mars erkunden. Wenn ich dabei das hohe Risiko habe, ich habe einen geschwächten Knochen, ich habe eine geschwächte Muskulatur, ich breche mir ein Bein, dann ist das für so eine Mission fatal. Und das ist etwas, wo wir sagen, da müssen wir was gegen tun. Und das ist etwas, wo wir daran arbeiten mit der Zentrifuge, dass wir eine Möglichkeit schaffen, die Schwerkraft in irgendeiner Form mitzunehmen, weil das eine elementare Komponente ist, die uns einfach stabil hält, die uns unseren Körper den Stimulus gibt, um letztendlich dann diese Muskulatur, diese Knochendichte zu erhalten, und daran arbeiten wir.
But what does the future look like as we look further ahead? Could we ascend the steps to a higher form of civilization? If we want to use artificial gravity not just for training, but to actually live in space, we'll have to think on an entirely different technical scale. In the 1970s, NASA developed concept studies of what something like this might look like. One possibility is the O'Neill cylinder.
Space colonization, beneficial occupancy of possibly the last and highest frontier, the space beyond Earth.
Gigantic cylinders with a diameter of several kilometers. In this case, bigger really is better, because with such enormous radii, the head and feet experience nearly the same acceleration. The problem of dizziness is therefore no longer an issue. Inside, a stable, Earth-like environment, landscapes with forests, lakes, and cities. Huge mirror systems direct light into the interior and create a day-night cycle. Another possibility, the Stanford Torus.
The Torus colony would become home for 10,000 people.
It's a classic from science fiction. Rotating, donut-shaped tubes with a diameter of about 2 kilometers. Similar in concept to the centrifuge at the DLR, only larger. Here too, the brain would likely have no issues with dizziness and the like, simply due to the structure's enormous size. Because the larger the radius, the slower the rotation speed must be to generate the same gravity. Within the ring, living spaces and usable areas would be accommodated across multiple levels. Before we are able to build such space stations, tether systems would be a possible intermediate step. In this setup, 2 capsules rotate around a common center of gravity, a good compromise for longer journeys. But for permanently inhabited stations, there's no getting around one thing: they have to be huge. It's a Herculean task for the engineers of tomorrow, yet the effort would be worth it. Because to truly feel at home in space, we need the one constant that has defined us since the dawn of time: solid ground beneath our feet.
They believe the huge space colony could be built before the year 2000. The Earth-like environment would even simulate our gravity.